Hey guys, tonight we walk a slower path, one worn by sandals and softened by time. You wake before the sun fully the sky outside your small window still caught in deep violet and the faintest blush of dawn. From somewhere nearby, you hear the soft rustle of linen and the low creak of a wooden door being opened. The scent that follows is unmistakable. Wood smoke curling in gentle spirals, doges beginning to rise, and a hint of crushed thyme drifting in on the breeze. You sit up slowly, wrap your cloak around your shoulders, and step out into the cool Galilean morning. Olive trees sway gently in the distance, their silver-green leaves whispering among themselves. Farther down the hill, smoke curls lazily from a neighbor's courtyard oven. A rooster calls once, then again, and they're walking slowly with the rhythm of someone who knows how to meet the day without rushing. Is Jesus. He turns slightly, noticing you, and nods with a quiet smile. You fall into step beside him. Neither of you says anything yet. The silence here isn't empty, it's warm, like dough resting under cloth. You might just wish you could stay here forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Love seeing this little family of peace spread across the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's walk beside Jesus tonight, slowly and quietly. The path curls between low stone walls, the kind that have stood through lifetimes of weather and wandering goats. The earth beneath your feet is cool and compact, trodden by the bare soles of children and the careful steps of old men carrying jars of water. Jesus doesn't speak yet. His presence feels like part of the landscape, steadfast, quiet, familiar. You reach the edge of a nearby grove. The trees here are older, thick-limbed with roots like knotted fingers. A donkey brays somewhere nearby, followed by the clink of iron tools. Someone is already tending the morning fire in a small oven, coaxing yesterday's embers back to life. The smell of baking flatbread, simple, flour and salt drizzles in the still air. Jesus pauses beside a fig tree. He rests one hand gently against its bark, and for a moment, the two of you just stand there in the hush. It's not dramatic, it's not loud, but it feels like a beginning. Mainstream historical fact. First-century Galilee was a patchwork of small agrarian villages like this one, each with stone homes, clustered close, shared courtyards, and families who farmed by hand, sowing and harvesting with the rhythms of the land. He steps again onto the path, and you follow toward a neighbor's field. It's barely light, but a man is already out there, inspecting the ground. He holds a worn wooden hoe in one hand and a basket of seeds slung across his shoulder. He nods at Jesus and gives you a tired smile. Hard clay again, he mutters, pressing the tool into the earth. The rain softened the top, but underneath, she's stubborn. Jesus kneels beside the furrow, digs his fingers into the dirt, and lifts a clump to his nose. He doesn't say much, just smells it, turns it, crumbles it between his hands. Give her time, he finally says, then stands and dusts off his palms. The farmer chuckles. You always say that. A quirky cultural detail. Galilean farmers often tested soil with their hands and noses, trusting touch and scent more than guesswork. A sweet, earthy smell meant health. A bitter edge meant trouble. As the man begins to work again, you and Jesus continue toward the next ridge. The world is still waking. Roosters call to each other across the hills, and a soft wind begins to stir the taller grass. Historians still wonder whether Jesus' early life as a carpenter, or more accurately, a tekton, meaning a general builder, kept him confined to wood and stone, or whether he also worked the land like most Galilean men did. Some suggest he split his time between both, shaping timbers and turning soil with equal patience. You glance at his hands. They're clean now, but the skin is tough, weathered not with violence, but with care. Hands that have held wood, bread, children, perhaps even the same kind of hoe as the man back in the field. As you climb the next small rise, the village behind you glows golden in the early light. You can see rooftops, the square outlines of homes, a few narrow columns of smoke rising as more ovens come alive. The day is beginning. Jesus stops at the crest and looks back for a moment. You do too. It's just a village, just a hill, just a morning. And yet, standing there beside him, you feel as though the world is still holding its breath, waiting for something sacred to unfold slowly, patiently, like seeds waiting under warm earth. You continue walking with Jesus down the gentle slope, the grass is brushing softly at your ankles, heavy with dew. The sun has now lifted just enough to paint the tops of the olive trees in delicate gold, each leaf shimmering silver green beneath the light. Bees hum drowsily in and out of the thistles that bloom in quiet corners, and the air smells of morning sun-warmed dust, distant firewood, and something faintly herbal, like wild oregano crushed underfoot. Jesus leads you toward a small plot of land, bordered by low stone markers. A woman is already there, kneeling, her linen sleeves rolled up as she works rows of young plants. She looks up with a start when you approach, then smiles, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Early as always, she says to Jesus. He squats beside her, not minding the dirt, and gestures toward the small green leaves rising from the soil. They've taken root. The woman nods. We soaked the seeds this time. Tamer's idea. Said it softens their stubbornness. Jesus touches one of the seedlings gently. The soil listens. He says, more to the plant than to anyone else. You watch quietly, the calmness of the scene settling into your breath. The woman passes you a water jar with a simple copper ladle. You drink, cool and grateful, then pour a little into the basin she uses to dampen the roots. The water soaks into the ground almost immediately. Mainstream historical fact. In the Judean hills, many farmers relied on terraced plots built into the slopes. These flat sections prevented runoff and erosion while conserving precious water during dry months. Jesus asks if she's heard any birds this morning. Only the doves, she says. The sparrows haven't come yet. There's a pause. Maybe they're waiting, he replies softly. The woman laughs. Then I'll wait with them. A quirky cultural detail. In some villages, people track the seasons by the return of certain birds. The first call of a sparrow, or the low trill of a nightjar, often marked the time to sow or harvest. Children were taught to listen before they could read. You find a flat rock nearby and sit down, watching as Jesus and the woman tend the rows with gentle efficiency. It's not hurried. Every motion has rhythm, like the swaying of olive branches or the hush of wind through tall grass. Historians still wonder how much agricultural life shaped Jesus' metaphors. Was the parable of the sower born from scenes like this: hands in soil, birds overhead, the quiet faith of seeds buried unseen? Perhaps Jesus stands and wipes his hands on his sash. The woman does the same, then pulls a small cloth from her belt and unwraps a piece of fig bread. She breaks it into 3 and hands each of you a piece. You chew slowly. The bread is soft and a little sweet, the fig's flavor faint but grounding. Nearby, a row of tall grasses shifts in the breeze. Jesus steps toward it, reaching down to brush the tops with his fingers. A few wildflowers have crept between the blades, tiny, fragile blooms the color of sunrise. You join him, crouching to see them more closely. They look like they've been painted onto the landscape by some patient hand. He picks one and holds it out to you. It grows where no one told it to, he says, but here it is. You tuck the flower behind your ear. The 3 of you stand for a moment in silence, letting the sun warm your shoulders and the wind carry whatever thoughts haven't been spoken. Then, as though on cue, the sparrows arrive, 3 of them, flitting through the low branches of a pomegranate shrub, wings bright against the green. Jesus smiles. They came after all. You glance again at the little rows of new plants, still glistening with dew. The earth is quiet now, but beneath its surface, life is stirring. You can feel it. The woman gathers her tools and says her goodbyes, heading back toward the village. You and Jesus remain a while longer, just watching the fields breathe. He sits on the low edge of the stone wall, and you do the same. From here, you can see the hills stretching out in soft folds, their shadows still blue beneath the light. You ask, how long does it take for them to grow? Jesus looks out over the land. Longer than you think, but not as long as it feels. The wind shifts again, and this time it brings the scent of barley from a nearby field, not yet ripe, but close. Somewhere farther off, someone is singing, the melody faint and winding, like the path back to the village. You rise slowly and begin walking again, leaving the small garden behind. You glance back only once. The rows are quiet now, still, as if listening. You follow Jesus along the winding path that skirts the edge of the planting fields, your sandals whispering over loose stones and patches of dry grass. The warmth of the morning deepens, though it hasn't yet reached the heavy heat of midday. There's a stillness in the air, like the land itself is holding its breath. The hills ahead are gentler here, their slopes dotted with low fig trees and bursts of thornbush. A narrow trail threads through them, edged by rough stones stacked generations ago. A shepherd's whistle echoes faintly from somewhere beyond the rise, followed by the soft bleat of goats. Jesus walks ahead, steady and relaxed. He stops now and then, not for dramatic signs or miracles, but to notice a sprouting weed between stones, a lizard sunning itself on a warm patch of rock, the fragile tracks of a night bird barely visible in the dust. He kneels near a cracked flat stone and lifts it gently. Underneath, a cluster of beetles scatters. He watches them without comment. You crouch beside him, resting your hand on the cool surface of the stone. It feels ancient, older than even the hills. Mainstream historical fact. In Judea, rocks and stones were both obstacle and resource. Farmers gathered them from fields to clear space for planting, then used them to build walls, terraces, and paths that shaped entire landscapes. Jesus replaces the stone carefully and stands, brushing dust from his palms. You continue together, the path rising now, leading toward a small grove of carob trees. You ask quietly, "Did you help build these paths?" He glances sideways. "Some of them." He doesn't elaborate, but you imagine it. Jesus as a younger man, hands calloused, shoulders sunburned, hauling stones with the same quiet presence he carries now, the same patience, the same steady strength. A quirky cultural detail. In many villages, teenagers were expected to help maintain the paths and terraces. It was a rite of passage, proving they could be trusted with the land's bones. At the grove, you pause in the shade. Carob pods hang in dark leathery clusters, their scent earthy and faintly sweet. Jesus breaks one open, revealing a row of small seeds inside. He holds it out for you to see. "They called this the poor man's sweet," he says, "but we didn't mind." You taste a piece. It's dry and chewy, with a bitterness that fades into something soft. You've never eaten anything quite like it. Jesus leans against a tree trunk, arms folded. "They said John lived on these," he adds, "carob and honey." You nod, remembering stories of the man in the wilderness, calling out to no one and everyone at once. You wonder what it would have been like to live off the land like that, so exposed, so certain. Historians still wonder how close Jesus and John were in those early years. Did they speak often? Did they argue, laugh, sit in silence by the river? Records don't say, only that they both carried something weighty into the world, something that couldn't be put down. The sun climbs higher, and you continue on, weaving through thornbush and tall grass. At one point, Jesus stops and points toward a patch of flowering weeds. "Thorns, but look at their flowers," he says. "Even the harshest things can bloom." You look closer, tiny white petals trembling in the breeze, so delicate they might disappear with one breath. And yet, here they are, rooted in dust. Beyond the grove, the path opens onto a ledge where the land drops away, revealing the terraced hills rolling toward the horizon. Small figures move across the landscape: farmers, shepherds, women carrying water jars on their shoulders. Smoke curls from a cooking fire somewhere below, the scent of lentils rising faintly in the air. You sit on a flat rock beside Jesus, your legs dangling over the edge. The stone is warm. The wind stirs the hem of your robe. He says nothing, and you're content with the silence. The two of you sit like that for some time, watching life unfold from above, slow, ordinary, beautiful. Then Jesus speaks, voice quiet. "I once helped rebuild a terrace over there," he says, pointing to a slope marked by a zigzag of stone walls. "Tamer's family, their youngest son, tried to help till he hurt his foot on a loose stone. He limped for weeks." You turn to him. "Did he get better?" Jesus smiles. "He learned to walk slower, to see the stones coming." You imagine it again, young boys and older men, rebuilding the land together, fitting stones into place like prayers. And now, years later, the terraces still hold. A breeze brushes your cheek. You glance down and see a line of ants moving purposefully across the rock. Each one carries something: crumb, husk, seed. They move in rhythm, not rushing, not idle. Jesus notices too. "They always know what to carry," he says, "and somehow that feels like a lesson, even if no one names it." The two of you rise again, your shadows stretching behind you. You begin the slow walk back down the trail, toward the planted fields and the low sounds of life returning for the midday rest. The sun is almost at its peak now. A fig tree offers brief shade, and you pause again, just long enough to breathe. Come, Jesus says gently, there's still more to see. And so, you go. The afternoon air thickens with heat, humming low like bees in the grass. You walk slowly now, the slope easing down toward a valley where young barley waves in long, gentle lines. Jesus leads the way, but he doesn't rush his pace, marches the rhythm of the land, the hush between cicada songs. You pass a woman bent low in her field, sleeves rolled and hands dusted in pale earth. She glances up, squinting in the sun, then smiles and waves. Jesus lifts a hand in return, his fingers catching the light for a heartbeat. The valley floor levels out, and your sandals brush against barley stalks, just tall enough to brush your knees. Their heads are still greenish gold, not quite ready for harvest. But soon. Mainstream historical fact. Barley was the first grain to ripen in ancient Judea, often harvested before wheat. It fed both livestock and the poor, and its early readiness made it a symbol of survival in lean years. Jesus stops in the middle of the field, crouches, and gathers a handful of stalks in one hand. He rubs them gently between his palms, releasing the faint smell of grain and sunlight. Then he holds the kernels out to you. You take one, roll it between your fingers, and pop it in your mouth. It's tough, but sweet, in a quiet way like the land's breath made solid. A quirky cultural detail. Children were often sent ahead of harvest crews to pluck the first grains and test them. These unofficial taste testers had the most honest verdicts and, sometimes the most delighted giggles. Jesus smiles, brushing chaff from his palms. There's a saying, he says, barley comes early to those who wait. You arch a brow. Isn't that the opposite of waiting? He laughs quietly. It depends on where the waiting began. He continues walking, letting his fingers trail over the tops of the grain. You follow, and the field sways gently around you, parting like water. At the edge of the field, you come to a low stone enclosure. A young man sits inside, tending a pair of goats with one hand and cradling a flute in the other. He raises it to his lips and plays a few soft notes, light, wandering, almost uncertain. Jesus leans against the wall, listening. You sit nearby, letting the sound wrap around your shoulders like a breeze. Still practicing? Jesus asks with a grin. The boy shrugs. They say the notes fall better when you're not trying so hard. Maybe they're right, Jesus replies. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the warmth, the quiet melody, and the scent of barley rise up like prayer. Historians still wonder how much music played a role in daily rural life during Jesus' time. Formal worship had its structured songs and chants, but in the countryside, music was often spontaneous, a shepherd's tune, a mother's lullaby, a festival drum in the distance. The boy finishes his song and lowers the flute. The goats like the low notes he offers, as if it's a scientific fact. Jesus chuckles. Then you're playing it perfectly. He offers the boy a piece of dried fig from his pouch, and the young man accepts it with a grateful nod. Then you rise again and continue down the dusty path. The sun is no longer overhead. It tilts westward now, throwing longer shadows that stretch behind olive trees like soft threads. You pass a small well built from stacked stone, its pulley creaking gently as a woman draws up a bucket. She glances at you both and says, "If you've come to help with weeding, there's still plenty left." Jesus smiles. We'll keep that in mind. A few paces later, he stops at the edge of a fallow plotland resting between plantings, dotted with thistles and dry grass. He walks its borders slowly, gaze lowered, lips murmuring something you can't quite hear. You walk beside him and feel the heat rise off the soil in waves. He kneels again, this time near a patch of cracked earth, where a single green shoot pushes through. Not barley, not wheat, something smaller, nameless. He cups the sprout in his hand as if shielding it from the sun. "There," he says softly. Patience in plain sight. You kneel, brushing your fingers across the soil. It's warm and crumbling, clinging to your skin like memory. You wonder how it survives here, this little plant. No sign of a spring nearby, no gardener. And yet it grows. You both rise and begin walking again, this time toward a cluster of date palms in the distance. Their trunks stand tall and straight, their tops rustling gently in the wind like soft applause. Jesus stops just before the shade touches his feet. He looks back at you. "We'll rest here a while." And so, you do. The shade of the date palms offers a kind of hush the open hills cannot. The heat settles behind you like a door gently closing, and beneath the arching fronds, everything slows. Jesus lowers himself to the ground with the ease of someone used to sitting on stone and dirt and roots. You follow, adjusting your cloak beneath you as dry palm leaves whisper overhead. He doesn't speak, not right away. His gaze wanders up through the feathered leaves, across the nearby rise where a shepherd's staff leans against a tree, and finally toward the horizon where the light begins to soften into the gentle gold of late afternoon. A soft wind picks up, rustling through the palms. One frond breaks free above you, cartwheeling through the air before landing soundlessly at your feet. Jesus chuckles. Even the trees are ready to let go. You pick up the leaf and trace its spine with your finger. Its edges are serrated, its pattern exacta, designed too delicate to be accidental. Mainstream historical fact. Day palms were vital in Judean life. Their fruit was dried and stored, turned into syrup or wine, and even the fronds were used for roofing. Mats, baskets, and on holy days, waved in celebration. Palms were a tree of both sustenance and symbol. Jesus leans back against the trunk, his eyes These palms remember things, he says quietly. You nod, not fully understanding, but not needing to. A quirky cultural detail. In some Judean villages, people believed that the oldest palms held the stories of every season they had survived. A child might be told, "The tree remembers the year the rains were late," or "This one saw the festival when you were born." You think of that now, sitting beneath a tree that may well have been here before either of you. Jesus reaches into his pouch and pulls out a small handful of dried dates. He offers you a few. They're sticky and rich, with a hint of honeyed smoke. You eat in silence, the sweetness lingering on your tongue. Do you ever miss the days when everything was simpler? You ask, not looking at him directly. He doesn't answer immediately. Then, they weren't simpler, just smaller, and small things carry their own weight. He rolls a date pit between his fingers thoughtfully, then tosses it gently into the grass. You plant what you can, he says, even if you're not the one who'll see it bear fruit. You lean back against the palm, your shoulders brushing its warm, fibrous trunk. The breeze brushes your cheek now and then, and for a while, the world is only breath and rustle and distant birds. Historians still wonder how often Jesus wandered like this alone or with companions, stopping beneath trees, lingering at wells. The scriptures recall the teachings, the healings, the multitudes, but surely there were also days, like this, slow, unwritten, invisible to time but precious in memory. Jesus stands and dusts his hands. The shadows beneath the trees have stretched. Somewhere in the distance, a goat bleats a harsh, almost comic sound that breaks the quiet like a bell. You both laugh softly, the spell of silence gently undone. You rise, stretching limbs that have grown heavy with rest. "Come," Jesus says, already stepping out of the shade. "There's something I want you to see." You follow him up a narrow path that winds between low stone markers and patches of tough, sun-bleached grass. As you climb, the trees grow sparse, replaced by open sky and wind-scoured rock. At the crest of the hill, you pause. Below, the land spills out in a patchwork of fields and groves, dry gullies and winding footpaths. Tiny rooftops glint in the distance. Farther still, a faint ribbon of water curls between reeds, perhaps the edge of a stream. Jesus doesn't speak. He just stands there, cloak stirring in the breeze, eyes tracing the land like a map made of memory. You stand beside him and breathe in the vastness. "There," he says, pointing to a cluster of trees along a distant ridge. "That's where we'll go tomorrow. There's a man who grows lentils, they're red ones, like fire. He swears they only sprout when the moon is thin." You smile. "And do they?" He shrugs. "You'll see." A silence settles again, this one deep and wide like the valley below. You sit on a stone ledge as Jesus remains standing. The sun is lowering behind you now, casting long fingers of shadow across the hills. The wind carries the scent of herbs, maybe thyme, maybe marjoram from somewhere unseen. The world feels enormous and intimate all at once. Jesus turns toward you. "We should head back before the lamps are lit." You nod, standing once more. As you descend the hill together, your footsteps stirring dust. The first evening swallows begin to dip and rise across the path, their calls sharp and fleeting. Behind you, the palms sway gently in the fading light, holding on to their secrets. The walk back toward the village is slower now, softened by the dimming light. The heat of the day fades from the stones beneath your feet, and the wind picks up just enough to cool your skin. Jesus moves with the rhythm of someone unhurried, not idle, but deeply at ease with the pace of the evening. You pass again beneath the date palms, their long fronds turning into silhouettes above your heads. Somewhere nearby, a cricket starts its song, then another, then a chorus. The world begins to shift from day to night, but it doesn't feel like an ending, it feels like a settling. Jesus reaches up and breaks off a thin, dried stem from a low branch. He twirls it between his fingers as he walks. You can tell how old the leaf was by how it curls, he says absently. If it folds inward, it died slowly. If it crumbles outright, it let go fast. Mainstream historical fact. The people of Judea often read nature closely, not just for farming, but for signs, for metaphors, for understanding time and spirit. Shepherds could predict weather by the pattern of the stars. Farmers judged the health of a field by the shape of leaves and the weight of wind. Jesus tosses the stem aside and adjusts the strap of his pouch, a quirky cultural detail. Children in the region sometimes wove palm stems into simple rings or tiny sandals for dolls. During festival seasons, those same children might carry palm leaves adorned with pomegranate seeds or strips of dyed wool, bright, humble offerings of joy. You think of those children now as you hear laughter in the distance, a shrill burst, chased by the padding of running feet. Two small figures dart across the path up ahead, waving sticks and calling out in a game you don't understand. Jesus smiles, but doesn't interrupt. As you near the edge of the village, the glow of oil lamps begins to flicker from within the clear homes. Their light spills across thresholds and flickers in the corners of courtyards, painting the dust with gold. The scent of roasted grain and warm bread still lingers in the air, mingling now with burning figwood and the sharp temps of goat cheese cooling on woven mats. A woman stands outside her doorway, shaking a rug. She nods as you pass, eyes kind but tired. Jesus returns the gesture with a soft word of greeting. "Another full day," she murmurs. "Another gift," he replies. Historians still wonder how much of Jesus' life was spent like this, moving quietly among the people, exchanging simple words and working beside them. The Gospels give us teachings and signs, but what of the days not recorded? Did he help repair fences? Did he carry jars of water? Was his presence, in itself, a kind of blessing? You pass the village well again. It's quieter now. Only one woman remains, filling a jar slowly, her reflection quivering in the rippling water. She glances up at Jesus, then at you, then looks away shyly. Jesus doesn't speak, but he watches her with quiet respect until she finishes her task. He kneels beside the well and dips his hand in. The water glows faintly in the lamplight. He doesn't drink, just lets it run through his fingers and drip back into the dark. You crouch beside him. "The well never moves," he says, "but it gives life to those who do." You think of how many hands have touched this stone, how many mornings and evenings it has witnessed. It is old, weather-worn, but it still holds something essential, something sacred. Jesus stands, brushing his palms on his robe, and you follow as he weaves through the narrowing lanes. You know this part of the village, well, lower rooftops, tighter alleys, the scent of animals rising from shaded pens. A neighbor calls a soft greeting. Another hands Jesus a folded piece of bread wrapped in cloth. He takes it with thanks and tucks it into his pouch without a second glance. Not every kindness needs attention. As you reach a small square near the edge of the village, you find a stone bench still warm from the sun. Jesus sits, and you join him. Above, the sky deepens into indigo. A single star blinks awake. A goat bleats nearby. A child's lullaby rises faintly from a nearby window, something wordless, just melody. The bread from earlier finds its way into your hand. You break it in two and offer half to Jesus. He accepts it with a nod. You eat slowly, the texture familiar, coarse, a little dry, but filling. Honest, he speaks softly between bites. Not every seed becomes a tree, not every word becomes a story, but every act of care that shapes the world, even if no one sees it. A silence follows, not heavy, just whole. The village continues to hum around you, low voices, the scrape of sandals, the clink of pottery. But here, on this bench, with the day winding down and the stars slowly gathering, it feels like everything has already arrived. Jesus leans back against the wall behind him, his eyes close, not in sleep, but in stillness. And you stay beside him, watching the dark rise slowly like water filling a jar. You wake early the next morning, before the first rooster cry, to a sky still bruised with indigo and ash. The air is cool and damp, soft with the scent of morning dew and charred olive wood from fires that never fully went out in the night. You sit up slowly and wrap your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Jesus is already awake. He stands near the edge of the courtyard, speaking quietly with Mary, his mother. Her head is wrapped in a linen scarf, and she holds a small bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth, likely for the market. Her voice is low, melodic, carrying the rhythm of someone who has started more mornings than she could count. When she sees you, she smiles gently. "Come," she says, "walk with him today." He walks softer when someone's beside him. You rise and follow Jesus out into the narrow lane. He moves like water through the village, turning gently around corners, stepping lightly over loose stones, never disturbing the silence more than necessary. The two of you head toward the terrace fields that stretch beyond the last homes. The sun is still hidden, but the sky begins to bloom. Thin streaks of gold and lavender stretch across the horizon. The hills glow faintly with promise. Jesus pauses beside a small patch of earth that's been cleared but not yet planted. He crouches down and draws a line in the dirt with his finger. "Someone's preparing," he says. You nod. The soil here is dry but not lifeless. It just needs tending. Mainstream historical fact. Judean farmers often let a field rest for a year after several seasons of planting, what they called a sabbatical year. This practice, rooted in tradition and belief, allowed the land to recover, restoring nutrients and increasing long-term yield. Jesus continues to trace small shapes in the dirt, lines, curves, what might be vines, or roots, or nothing at all. Then he brushes the patterns away with his hand and stands. "Even fallow earth knows what it's for," he says. A quirky cultural detail. Some families in Galilee had the custom of singing to their fields during planting season. Rhythmic chants meant not just for the workers, but for the soil itself. It was believed the earth listened best when it was spoken to kindly. You move onward. Farther along the terraces, a man is already working. He stands bent at the waist, carefully pressing seeds into shallow furrows. A clay jar filled with grain sits beside him. His robe is damp with dew, and his hands move with practiced ease. Jesus greets him with a quiet shalom. The man straightens, wipes his brow, and offers a tired smile. "Long season ahead," he mutters. "The patient one see harvest," Jesus replies. Historians still wonder whether Jesus himself helped with planting as a child. While he is often called a carpenter, or more precisely, a tekton, which could mean builder or artisan, small villages often blurred roles. Children helped where they were needed, especially during harvest and sowing seasons. You watch as Jesus takes a turn, kneeling beside the field. He cups a handful of grain in his palm and lets it trickle down between his fingers, watching the small shapes fall into the dark earth. He presses them gently down and covers them with a thin layer of soil. The man watches him work and doesn't interrupt. Later, when you move on, Jesus points toward a neighboring hill where sheep move slowly across the slope. Their bells chime softly, disjointed but peaceful. A good crop doesn't only need seed, he says. It needs time, rain, shelter from wind, and someone to believe in it. You walk in silence for a while. Eventually, the path leads through a patch of wild grasses, yellow and swaying. A few olive saplings grow nearby, thin, fragile things barely taller than your waist. Jesus stops before one and crouches again. He presses his hand to the base of the tiny trunk, fingers gentle, reverent. "This one has a long road," he murmurs. You kneel beside him. The soil here is loose, well tilled, but the sapling leans slightly. You place a few stones around its base to help brace it. He nods. That helps. The wind picks up again, rustling the grasses around you. You sit together for a time, not speaking. A distant rooster crows. The sun is nearly over the ridge now, casting long, cool light across the valley. Everything seems to pause, jug for a breath. Jesus stands. "Come," he says softly. "There's more to see." And so you rise too, your knees stiff from the cool earth, your fingertips still dusted with soil. You continue on. The sun climbs slowly as you and Jesus continue your walk. The earth is warming beneath your sandals, soft dust rising with each step. Birds call from the olive branches overhead, their songs weaving in and out of the silence like threads in a loom. The air is fragrant with crushed thyme and morning stone. You pass a narrow brook, its waters shallow but clear, meandering through the fields, as if with no particular urgency. Jesus pauses to crouch beside it, cupping his hands to take a drink. You follow suit. The water is cold, tasting faintly of minerals and clay. Farther up the slope, you hear a rhythmic creaking and dull thuds. As you round a bend, you come upon a man and his son planting rows of young vines. They work in harmony, one loosening the soil, the other placing slender cuttings into the furrows. Jesus stops to watch. The father nods in greeting. The vines are late this year, he says. They'll come in their own time, Jesus replies, folding his arms, eyes soft. Mainstream historical fact. Viticulture in 1st century Judea was a slow, attentive craft. New vines took 3 years to bear fruit, and growers trained them carefully along trellises or low stone walls. Wine wasn't just for celebration, it was part of daily life, mixed with water to purify and refresh. The boy fumbles slightly with a tangle of roots. Jesus kneels beside him, helping steady the shoot. You have a good eye, he tells the boy gently. Just let the vine lead. It knows where it wants to go. The boy grins shyly, encouraged. A quirky cultural detail. In Galilean tradition, some planters would whisper prayers or blessings over the first vine of the season, tracing circles in the dirt around it for protection. A few even placed tiny chips of wood from older, fruitful vines at the base, hoping to pass along their strength. Jesus steps back, hands on his knees. The vineyard will be beautiful, he says. The father smiles, then looks up at the sky. If the rains are kind, rain listens, Jesus says with a faint smile. When the ground is ready, you move on, the vineyard fading behind you as the landscape widens. The hills here are soft and broad, covered in shrubs and wildflowers. Bees drone low over the blooms, and insects flick through the air like sparks. Jesus walks slightly ahead now, his cloak fluttering lightly at his ankles. You come upon a shepherd resting beneath a thorn tree, his flock scattered lazily across the slope. He raises his hand in greeting but doesn't rise. His staff leans against the tree, and a small leather pouch sits open beside him. Figs, a crust of bread, a twist of dried meat. Jesus kneels beside him without a word and accepts the piece of bread the man breaks off and offers. You sit too, sharing in the small meal. The shepherd points toward a awe nearby, her belly round. That one's due soon, he says. Jesus chews slowly, eyes thoughtful. She's carrying more than lamb, he says. She's carrying promise. The shepherd nods, understanding something deeper than words. Historians still wonder how often Jesus wandered these hills as a child or young man, whether he truly spent time among shepherds, watching the sky and learning the patterns of flocks. Some suggest his metaphors came from first-hand familiarity. Others believe they were simply the natural language of his people, learned through parable and proximity. You finish the bread in silence. A few goats bleat somewhere behind the rise, and the shepherd rises slowly, dusting his robes. I'll walk with you for a bit, he offers. The three of you continue on together. The shepherd speaks of the weather, the drier season that's coming, and how the grass is thinning too early this year. Jesus listens without judgment, only asking a question now and then, always gently, never prying. Eventually, the shepherd veers off, waving once more as he returns to his flock. Jesus stops on a high overlook, where the land rolls away in ridges and dips, dotted with olive and fig, with vines and barley and almond groves. The sunlight now is bright, but soft, like it understands the holiness of quiet things. He sits down on a warm rock and gestures for you to do the same. Beneath you, the valley breathes. Jesus picks up a small seed from the dirt beside him, almond, perhaps, or barley. He rolls it between his fingers, then sets it in a shallow groove near his sandal, and gently presses earth over it. Not much to see now, he says, but give it time. A breeze stirs the tall grass. You sit still, watching the spot where he planted it, though you know you won't see it grow today. Still, it feels like something has begun. The rock is warm beneath you, the stone having gathered the heat of the morning sun. You lean back on your hands, letting your breath settle, letting your eyes trace the winding lines of the valley below. Jesus sits nearby, silent, one knee drawn up, a hand resting loosely on it. His gaze is steady but soft, as if he sees something not quite visible to you, something just beyond the horizon. The two of you rise slowly and begin walking again, your feet brushing through wild grasses that release a dry, herbal scent with each step. A few butterflies flicker by, their wings flashes of saffron and white. You pass under a thicket of almond trees, their branches already budding, though Spring is still weeks away. Jesus stops and touches one of the slender buds, his fingertips barely grazing it. Too soon, he murmured. Mainstream historical fact. Almond trees were among the earliest to bloom in the Judean countryside, often signaling the shift from winter to spring. Their blossoms arrive suddenly, and with great beauty, snowy pink and white against the bare landscape, a sign of renewal but also of fragility. The path begins to narrow, curling along the side of a gentle ridge. You can see a cluster of homes in the distance, a small hamlet built of flat, pale stones. A few smoke trails rise from the rooftops, curling skyward in the still air. A donkey brays somewhere below, and the faint sound of a flute trickles up the slope like water. Jesus slows as you approach the first home. A woman is sitting outside, her hair wrapped in a loose indigo scarf, her hands busy with a spindle of wool. She looks up as you draw near and smiles, nodding in quiet greeting. "Welcome, Rabbi," she says. Jesus smiles back and sits on the low stone wall beside her. You sit near his feet. The woman speaks of the land, how the rains have been light, how the almond blossoms came too early this year, and how her youngest child keeps singing in his sleep. Her voice is gentle, lined with both worry and humor. Jesus listens, nods, then takes the spindle from her hand for a moment. He turns it once or twice, fingers deft, careful. "My mother used to hum while spinning," he says, handing it back. A quirky cultural detail. In many Galilean homes, spinning wool was a constant rhythm of the day, performed between tasks or while talking to neighbors. Women often tied their spindles to their belts so they could walk and spin at the same time, letting the fibers trail like silk behind them. Jesus rises after a while, brushing dust from his robe, and thanks the woman for her stories. She nods, smiling as she returns to her work. Her spindle whirs softly. You continue onward. The village is quiet this time. Of most are in the fields, you suspect, or tending to animals. You pass an old man asleep under a fig tree, his mouth open slightly, a clay cup beside him. A young girl leads a goat by a frayed rope, humming something wordless. Jesus pauses as a group of children runs past, chasing a ball of bundled linen. One of them stumbles, scrapes his elbow, and bursts into tears. Jesus kneels beside him, wipes the dirt from the boy's face, and says something you don't quite hear. The boy sniffs once, then runs back into the game, a wide smile blooming across his face. You walk again. Historians still wonder whether Jesus spent these wandering afternoons in small villages, slipping unnoticed between courtyards and paths, speaking with shepherds and spinners and wide-eyed children. Some say these quiet hours did more to shape his teachings than any scroll or synagogue. Others argue his time was mostly spent in labor. But here, now, he seems entirely at home. The path rises gently once more, leading toward a dry terrace where barley has been planted in narrow rows. You see a man working with a wooden hoe, sweat streaking the dust on his arms. He stops when he sees Jesus, leaning on the handle, smiling. "Would you trade words for water?" he asks, lifting a jug. Jesus grins. "Only if it's cold." The man laughs and pours water into a wide, flat cup. It smells faintly of clay but tastes clean and refreshing. You sit together beneath a crooked olive tree, its limbs casting patterned shade over the ground. The man talks about seeds, how the birds came and ate the first planting, how the second batch washed away in a storm, how this time, maybe, the soil would hold. Jesus listens carefully. Then he says, "Sometimes the ground must remember who it is before it can hold anything." The man nods slowly, as if turning that over in his mind. The breeze picks up slightly, and the olive leaves shimmer silver in the light. "Next season, I'll dig deeper," the man says. Jesus places a hand briefly on his shoulder before rising, "And the seeds will wait for you." You move on, the sun slanting toward the west now, casting the hills in amber tones. Shadows lengthen, softening the ridges, and the light begins to feel like a whisper more than a song. You follow Jesus past a field and down toward a hollow where wild thyme grows thick. He kneels and runs his hand through the low brush, releasing the sharp, sweet scent into the air. He presses a sprig into your hand. "Take this with you," he says, "for remembering." The thyme scent lingers on your fingers as you walk, its sharpness mingling with the dry sweetness of the afternoon air. The sun hangs lower now, turning everything to gold. The olive trees shimmer in their dusky silver coats, and the dust underfoot has taken on a honeyed glow. A quiet peace has settled over the hills. You and Jesus follow a winding path that curls along the edge of a terrace slope. Dry stacked stone walls border plots of barley and beans, each carefully laid with the wisdom of generations. Some are weedy, some freshly tilled, others bare and waiting. It is the waiting that draws your eye. Jesus stops by one such plot bare earth, sun-cracked and uneven. He crouches and runs a hand over it slowly, fingertips tracing ridges and furrows like a scribe reading an ancient scroll. Mainstream historical fact: farming in Judea relied on seasonal rains, rocky soil, and the delicate balance between hope and patience. Terracing was used to capture water, and fields were often rotated or left fallow to recover. Seeds were sown by hand thrown in wide arc sand. Trust carried the rest. Jesus picks up a small stone, then another. He holds one in each hand and turns them over thoughtfully. You know, he says, it takes faith to leave the soil alone. You sit beside him, the earth warm beneath your legs. He places the stones in a small pile beside him, as if building something unseen. Everyone watches the sowing. He continues, but it's the pausing that feeds the ground. You listen, heart quiet. There is no rush in his voice, no urgency, just a rhythm that feels older than time. A bird trills nearby, hopping from branch to branch of a gnarled pomegranate tree. Jesus watches it, then tosses a crumb from his pocket to the dry earth. The bird flutters down, pecks at it, and flies off again. Even waiting feeds someone, he says. A quirky cultural detail. Some Galilean farmers would bury a clay shard or small wooden token in fallow field, symbols of blessing or prayer, marking their hope for future abundance. The tokens were often made by children or elders, a quiet ritual of trust. You rise again, brushing soil from your robes. Together, you pass under a crooked archway of fig branches, where bees hum lazily in the warm air. You spot a boy leaning over a shallow ditch, his hands coated in mud, carefully pressing water from a small channel toward a cluster of wilting plants. Jesus watches, then kneels beside him. "Let me see your hands," he says. The boy holds them out, muddy, scraped, but determined. Jesus smiles. They know what to do. He helps shape the earth a little more, deepening the groove so water can flow more easily. The boy beams. Historians still wonder whether these small, unnoticed moments, children shaping water, women spinning wool, men watching weathered seeds, formed the foundation of Jesus' vision. Was it in fields like these, amid the simplest labor, that his parables were born? Or did he craft them later, from memory, like bread drawn from fire? You think about that now as you walk on. The air begins to shift, just slightly. A breeze picks up from the west, stirring loose leaves and bending tall grasses at their tips. You and Jesus pause at a bend in the road where wild mustard plants bloom bright yellow against the stones. He crouches again, tracing the edge of a stalk with his finger. "This one's nearly gone to seed," he says. "Soon the wind will carry it where it needs to go." He pinches a pod between thumb and forefinger, then lets it fall gently into the wind. "You might not see where it lands," he adds, "but something always remembers." You stand in silence for a while, the mustard flowers nodding in agreement, the breeze whispering among the rocks. You begin to climb a small rise now, feet slipping slightly in the dust. At the top, you both stop to look out across the wide plain below, a patchwork of fields, orchards, and narrow paths. The sun has dipped enough to cast everything in long, drowsy shadows. Down in the distance, you see someone carrying a basket on their head, walking alone along a footpath lined with prickly pear and scrub. A pair of goats bleats somewhere behind you. Jesus sits on a flat rock, the same color as his sandals. You join him. "It's easy to forget how much is alive," he says quietly, "even when nothing moves." The wind catches his cloak and flutters it softly. "You think the hills are still?" he continues, "but underneath, there's work." You close your eyes, listening not just to his voice, but to the land itself. The creak of branches, the rustle of grass, the hush of things growing unseen. You think about the seeds planted earlier, the ones in the dry plot, the ones caught in mustard pods, the ones tucked into fields not yet ready. You picture them now beneath the earth, breathing in darkness, trusting something will call them upward. Jesus stands again, brushing dust from his palms. "Come on," he says, "let's go find supper." You smile and rise, falling into step beside him once more. The breeze follows, lifting the time in your pocket, the hem of your robe, the silence between you both. The light has softened to amber as you and Jesus wind your way back down the hillside, stepping carefully where roots twist across the path. The breeze still moves with you, brushing gently against your cheeks like a whispered blessing. Every now and then, a locust clicks its wings through the air and disappears again into silence. You come upon a low stone wall, half sunk into the earth, where a shepherd boy sits alone. He cradles a small flute in his hands, though he's not playing, just holding it, as if waiting for the right moment. His flock is scattered lazily nearby, nibbling dry grass or lying still, legs folded beneath them like resting travelers. Jesus greets him with a nod, and the boy smiles, shy but curious. "Do you play?" Jesus asks. The boy shrugs, then lifts the flute and lets a soft, uncertain tune rise into the air. It wobbles at first, but then smooths into something clear, something old and simple, and carried more by breath than skill. Mainstream historical fact: music in first-century Judea was often spontaneous and deeply woven into daily life. Shepherds, farmers, and even children might carry flutes made from reeds or bone, and simple melodies passed through families like heirlooms. It wasn't for performance. Jesus listens with his eyes half closed, his face relaxed, peaceful. When the tune ends, he says nothing at first, just places a hand on the boy's shoulder and lets the silence speak. The boy's face lights up like a lantern. You walk on, farther along, past the last of the fig trees. You come to a low cluster of homes gathered near a well. A small fire smokes in a corner courtyard, its scent warm and woody. Fig branches again, curling smoke skyward in elegant spirals. A woman is pounding herbs with a stone mortar, her sleeves rolled and her brow furrowed in focused rhythm. Jesus pauses, watching, and she glances up. "Rosemary and lentils," she says, "and a bit of mint for the little one." He smiles. "Smells like kindness." She laughs and wipes her hands. "Smells like tomorrow's leftovers." A quirky cultural detail. In many Galilean homes, meals were planned not for a single moment but for continuation. What was boiled today might be baked tomorrow. Flavors deepened overnight, and combinations shifted by necessity and intuition. This was not wastefulness, it was devotion to sustenance. She offers you each a warm fig, halved and sticky, nestled in a clay dish beside the pounding stone. You thank her with a slight bow and take a bite. It melts on your tongue, honeyed and soft. Jesus crouches beside a child seated nearby, who is watching ants march in a line across the stones. "What do you see?" he asks. The child blinks, surprised, then answers, "They're carrying crumbs, all the way to that hole." Jesus watches for a moment, then nods. Even the smallest have a purpose. Historians still wonder whether Jesus' fascination with the natural world came from teachings he received or from his own quiet observations. Was he trained in the formal language of metaphor? Or did he simply listen so long to ants and birds and seeds that parables grew of their own accord? You feel that question settle in you now like a gentle weight. The sky continues to dim, pale blue deepening to violet at the edges. You help carry a small basket from one courtyard to another, figs and herbs in an old folded cloth. The fabric smells of smoke and thyme, worn thin by countless washings, softer than anything new. Jesus lingers near a doorway as an old man sits on a stool just inside. His hands are calloused, his gaze distant. "Evening," Jesus says gently. The man blinks, as if pulled from a long way off. "Evening." Jesus doesn't ask questions. He just sits beside him. You wait too, standing in the threshold where lantern light spills out onto the stones. A clay lamp rests near the door, its flame low but steady. The glow flickers over the edges of baskets. A folded blanket, a broom of bound reeds. Everything is quiet. You don't speak. There's no need to. Then, after a while, the man murmurs, "My daughter was here earlier. Left supper. I wasn't hungry, but I saved it." Jesus nods slowly. "It'll taste better now." You help him lift the bundle into the man's lap. He unwraps it carefully. A small loaf, a few olives, a sprig of dried herb tied with twine. He smiles, just barely. The wind stirs again, brushing the flame in the lamp without extinguishing it. Jesus stands. "We'll see you again," he says. The man nods. "You're welcome anytime." And with that, you continue walking. The village lanes are dim now, touched by the faint glow of oil lamps in windows and courtyards. Somewhere a dog barks, short and sharp. Then, quiet again. A low rooftop comes into view, flat and wide. Jesus steps up onto the worn stones and looks out across Nazareth. Its rooftops now glimmering with small lights like stars come to earth. You climb up beside him, breath slow in your chest. "You ever sleep up here?" he asks. You nod. "Once I remember the cold." He smiles, but the sky makes it worth it. You both sit, backs against the raised lip of the roof, sandals set neatly aside. The stars are just beginning to show, one by one, faint at first, then stronger. Jesus says nothing more. He just watches, and you, beside him, do the same, letting the hush of the hour wrap around you like a woven cloak, stitched with fig smoke and warm stone and the faint song of crickets rising in the grass below. The night settles slowly, like flour drifting in the air, soft and deliberate. From your seat on the rooftop beside Jesus, you watch Nazareth dim into a scattering of quiet shadows and flickering lamps. It's the kind of evening that doesn't rush you. It waits, open and still, letting you rest inside it. The stars now dot the sky more clearly, pale and sharp against the velvet black. A soft wind curls across the roof, carrying the scent of distant fig smoke and the dry sweetness of packed earth. Jesus pulls his cloak tighter, and you do the same. The wool scratchy but comforting. Somewhere below, a mother hushes her child with a gentle lullaby, just a few notes repeated again and again, like a prayer that doesn't need words. Jesus turns to you, his voice low. "There was a tree near our home," he says, "bent almost sideways, growing out of a crack in the stone. I used to think it looked like it was praying." You picture each rot stubborn in the rock, branches bowed not from weakness but reverence. Mainstream historical fact. The terrain around Nazareth is rocky and uneven. Trees and crops grew wherever they could have found in soil hauled and placed by hand. Vineyards and fig trees were planted in terraces, held by retaining walls made without mortar, just stone on stone and generations of patience. Jesus leans back against the rooftop wall. "That tree taught me something," he continues. "He didn't ask the stone to move. It just grew around it." The thought settles in your chest like warm water. You lie back beside him, gazing upward. The stars seem closer from here, less like distant fires, and more like companions, quiet and ancient. A dog howls once in the distance, but not out of fear, just acknowledgement. The world is wide, and things echo in it. A quirky cultural detail. Families in Galilee often slept on rooftops in the warmer seasons. These flat spaces became nighttime sanctuaries, cooled under the stars. Children would whisper stories beneath shared blankets, and elders watched for shooting stars or signs in the sky. Some believed dreams drifted more clearly when your head was closest to the heavens. Jesus points upward. "That one there," he says, motioning to a bright star above the olive groves. "I used to pretend it was watching me, not judging, just keeping company." You nod. "Do you think stars notice us?" you ask, and your voice sounds smaller than you expect. He's quiet a moment. Then, if not the stars, then something behind them. Historians still wonder about Jesus' early understanding of the divine. Was it taught in synagogue readings, shaped by family prayers, or whispered to him in the stillness of starlit nights like this? Some suggest his theology began not in doctrine but in the rhythm of daily life, observing what grew, what broke, and what waited. He stands slowly and stretches, cloak fluttering slightly in the night air. "Come on," he says. "There's something I want to show you." You follow him down the narrow stairs from the roof, sandals in hand, careful not to wake the house below. The streets are mostly empty now, save for a cat that slips across the stones like a moving shadow and a lantern swaying gently near someone's door. He leads you beyond the last house on the edge of the village, toward a rise where grasses sway tall and silver. The moon has risen, its light soft and clear, casting long shadows that ripple like cloth across the ground. You reach a small press carved into the limestone, a shallow circle, where olives were once crushed beneath a turning stone. Now it sits quiet, its surface is weathered, filled with leaves and the scent of time. Jesus kneels beside it and runs a hand along its rim. "My father taught me how to turn the stone," he says. "It was heavy, but if you pushed with the rhythm, not against it, it turned easier." You sit beside him. The stone is cool against your palm. He continues, "We used to say, the oil doesn't come from pressing harder, it comes from pressing with care." You look at the grooves worn smooth by years of labor, wonder about all the hands that shaped and strained and poured from this place. Jesus rises again. He looks back toward Nazareth. Lights dimming now, the rooftops barely glowing in the moonlight. Most people think holiness is loud, he says, but I think it starts like this, silent and slow. You walk together back toward the village. As you near the gate, a figure steps out from a shadow. It's the shepherd boy with the flute, now held loosely in his hand, eyes wide in the dark. Couldn't sleep, he murmurs. Jesus doesn't speak. He just gestures to walk with you. So the three of you move quietly, side by side, your feet whispering across the dust. No one speaks. The silence is enough. You pass the same fig tree from earlier. The fruit now glows silver in the moonlight. A breeze lifts a few leaves, and they shiver like tiny bells. At the doorway of the house, the boy pauses. Jesus places a hand gently on his shoulder, then watches as he disappears inside. The door closes softly behind him. The crickets had begun their chorus again, low and steady, like breath. And as you step inside your home, Jesus beside you, a warmth spreads from your chest outward, not from exertion, from something quieter. The kind of warmth that says, you belong. The clay lamp near the door flickers as you pass, casting a long shadow that blends with his. You don't speak as you both sit again, unwrapping the folded flatbread left earlier. You break it in half and hand him a piece. He bows his head, and once more, everything's still. The morning comes gently, not in a rush of brilliance but with a hush, a gradual unfolding. Pale light seeps through the woven window screen, soft as breath. You stir beneath your blanket, the scent of earth and oil lingering faintly in the air. Jesus is already up. You hear the sound of clay touching wood, the quiet scrape of a jug being moved. When you step outside, he's sitting near the threshold, sandals already laced, eyes fixed on the horizon where the hills glow faintly with promise. He nods once, and you follow. The village is still wrapped in sleep. No brooms sweeping, no laughter from the courtyards. Only the murmur of doves nesting on rooftops, and the distant yawn of a donkey greeting the day. You take the south path out of Nazareth, passing fields stubbled with the last remnants of barley, their edges lined with dry thistles. The air is cool, tinged with dew, and the wind pulls gently at your sleeves. Today, Jesus says, after a while, we walk to where the planting starts. Mainstream historical fact. In the Judean hills, early sowing began after the autumn rains had softened the ground. Farmers worked terraces carved painstakingly over generations, spreading seeds by hand and guiding wooden plows pulled by donkeys or oxen. Grain, especially barley and emmer wheat, was the staple crop, requiring timing, prayer, and no small amount of hope. You reach a field, its furrows faintly visible under the golden sheen of dust. A man is already at work there, shoulder deep in the tar spent at the waist, hand open, scattering seed in short, practiced arcs. He glances up, nods, and continues. Jesus watches him for a while, saying nothing. Then, it looks like nothing, doesn't it? You nod. The field appears unchanged, just rows of dry earth, with seeds vanishing into silence. But something's happening, Jesus says. Even now, he gestures for you to come closer, kneeling down and brushing away the top layer of soil. You see it, a single grain resting there, still whole, unmoving. Still, he murmurs. It begins. A quirky cultural detail. In some villages, farmers would hum or chant softly while planting, not songs of labor, but small remembered phrases, snatches of psalms or ancestral blessings, spoken half to the soil and half to themselves. It was said that seeds listened, and that a sown seed grew straighter. Jesus begins humming, now low and tuneless, but steady, a sound with no edge. The farmer hears him, and doesn't pause. He just lets the song fold into his rhythm, like a second shadow. You stay beside the furrow, trailing your fingers through the dirt. There's something restful about the repetition, the surrender to time. Nothing here grows quickly, but everything knows how to wait. Historians still wonder how deeply Jesus' parables were rooted in the agrarian life around him. Did the parable of the sower come not from imagination, but from watching this exact act again and again's, tossing hope into the dust? You move along the edge of the field, following the uneven rows, your sandals brushing wild grasses. Farther up the slope, another farmer wrestles with a plough-wooden, thick-limbed, rough from age. The donkey in front of him is stubborn this morning, braying and resisting every few feet. The man sighs, wipes his brow, and presses on. Jesus lifts a hand in silent greeting. You ask, Why do they keep doing this? It looks so hard. He turns to you, eyes warm. Because the ground remembers. You frown. Remembers what? Rain, warmth, the promise of roots. He pauses. Sometimes faith means planting even when you can't imagine the harvest. The sun is higher now, tilting light across the region. A faint haze rises from the earth, fragrant with crushed fennel and warm stone. Bees hum lazily from nearby flowers. The donkey has calmed, and the plow begins to cut clean. You find a flat stone near the edge and sit. Jesus joins you, pulling a small pouch from his belt. Inside are figs, wrinkled and dark. He hands you one. It's sweet, richer than you expected, tasting faintly of honey and dust. From the valley market, he says, dried last season, still good. You chew slowly, grateful for the nourishment. A child appears nearby barefoot, arms full of straw. She waves, then vanishes behind a terraced wall. Her voice carries faintly back, calling to someone unseen. You and Jesus rise again and begin walking toward the trees. The olive groves here are younger than the ones near Nazareth. Their trunks are smoother, their limbs not yet split by time, but they already cast shade, and the soil beneath them is soft and dark. Do they always take root, you ask, thinking of the seeds you saw in the field? Jesus shakes his head. No. Some never sprout. Some sprout and wither, but others, he trails off, touching a low branch, heavy with forming fruit. Others feed generations. He pauses under one tree and kneels. Beneath the mulch and the dust, a new shoot rises barely a finger's height, but strong. He presses the soil gently around its base, smoothing the earth with his palm. You plant, knowing you won't always see the fruit, he says, but you plant anyway. A gust of wind moves through the grove, making the leaves chatter softly above. The two of you sit there a while, letting the hush settle around you. There's no rush. The land itself seems to exhale. And you think, perhaps holiness is this simple. Not thunder, not fire, just a seed in soil and someone willing to wait. You leave the olive grove slowly, the silence still wrapped around your shoulders like a cloak. The wind follows you, tugging gently at the edge of your robe, as if reluctant to let you go. The path winds upward now, climbing a low ridge scattered with stones and dry grass. The sky above has deepened to a soft blue, the kind that glows with early promise but not yet heat. Jesus walks a few steps ahead, quiet but steady, his shadow lengthening with the slope. Up here, the land opens wide. The hills roll away like a patchwork of browns and greens, and in the distance you can make out tiny rooftops catching light villages nestled into the curves of the land, each one shaped by time and survival. Jesus stops beside a small outcrop of stone and places one hand on its sun-warmed surface. Sit, he says, and you do. For a while, neither of you speaks. Below, in the valley, you can see movement, figures walking, a cart pulled by oxen, someone waving from a rooftop. A goat bleats faintly. Life, stitched into the land like thread into linen. Mainstream historical fact. From vantage points, like this one, early Judeans could see for miles. Shepherds, watchmen, and travelers all relied on such high places to mark paths, to sense weather shifts, and to watch for danger or opportunity. Some scholars believe ancient prayer practices began in these places, simple rituals of stillness, proximity, and perspective. Jesus leans back, his head tilted to the side. They used to pray here, he murmurs, as if answering your thoughts. Here. He nods. Long ago, before the village, just the hills and the stars and the wind. You didn't need more. He glances around. It feels plausible. The air itself seems older here, layered with things forgotten. He picks up a stone, flat and round, and turns it over in his palm. Then another, and another, arranging them gently in a line before you. Without a word, he begins to shape them into a circle. You watch, unsure of the purpose, but willing. A quirky cultural detail. In some Judean hill communities, it was common to mark moments of quiet or gratitude with small stone circles, nothing grand, just a simple way to hold the memory in the land. They were called silent places, and they were meant to disappear naturally with time. You add a few stones to his circle. It's not symmetrical, not perfect, but it feels like something. Jesus smiles faintly. Let it be. You let it. The wind rises, carrying with it the scent of wild thyme and baked dust. A hawk circles far above, its wings motionless against the sky. Somewhere, hidden among the grass, a cricket begins its slow rhythm. Historians still wonder whether Jesus truly preferred wilderness places, or simply used them out of necessity. Was solitude his sanctuary, or just a pause between crowds? Did he seek these hills because they were quiet, or because they echoed with the voices of prophets long before him? You watch him trace a line in the dirt beside the stone circle. It spirals inward, then ends in a single dot. He doesn't explain. He doesn't need to. You sit in silence again, and this time it feels full, not empty. The kind of silence that listens back. Then, softly, Jesus begins to speak. Once, my father Joseph told me about a seed he planted before I was born. A fig. He said it never bore fruit, not once, but he wouldn't cut it down. He said the tree was still trying. You glance at him. He continues, he died before it did. But the spring after, there were 3 figs. Just 3. Enough. He looks at you. What you start might outlive you. You nod slowly. It's not a lesson. It's a story. A memory folded into dust. You brush your hand across the stone beside you. It's warm now, almost hot. A small ant trails along its edge, unhurried, certain. Far below, the cart you saw earlier is now just a speck moving toward the next village. The goat has stopped bleating. Everything seems slower from up here, and you begin to understand why someone would return to such a place, not for answers, but for stillness. Jesus stands, brushing dust from his robe. You rise to. The two of you begin to walk down the other side of the ridge, your feet pressing into the soil where time grows low and thick. He doesn't speak again for a long time. The silence stretches, but it does not feel cold. It feels like planting. You carry the shape of the stones in your memory, the spiral in the earth, the wind on your cheek, and you carry a thought that won't quite settle, but also won't leave. Maybe faith isn't loud. Maybe it's not fire or thunder or parting skies. Maybe it's just a quiet hill, a line in the dirt, a tree that took years to bear fruit. Maybe it's staying long enough to see what blooms. You follow Jesus down the slope, the path soft beneath your sandals, worn by time and hooves and bare feet. The light is shifting now, slanting from the west, casting the long shadows of fig trees and stone walls across the hillside. It is the hour when the world exhales, tired and golden. At the base of the hill, there's a small vineyard rows of low grapevines trained across dry branches and rough-hewn stakes. Jesus pauses there, resting one hand on a vine heavy with leaves. The clusters are still small, still hard, green. They won't be ready for weeks, he says. You nod, though he isn't really speaking to you. Or perhaps he is. His fingers gently lift a single cluster, turning it slightly to let the light catch the pale fruit. Mainstream historical fact. In Judea, vineyards were often family-run and interplanted with figs, olives, or even barley to make full use of the land. Grapes were essential not only for wine, but for syrup and dried raisins, and even as a kind of offering in temple rituals. Pruning, tending, and harvesting were tasks passed from one generation to the next, often learned by children at their father's side. Jesus kneels and checks the base of the vine. They've kept it well, he says softly. Clean earth, good stones. Someone loves this field. A boy calls out from nearby. He's crouched at the far end of the rows, holding a long stick and chasing grasshoppers into a clay jar. When he sees Jesus, he grins wide and waves, forgetting the jar entirely. Jesus waves back, his smile easy and bright. A quirky cultural detail. Some children in Galilean vineyards were known to collect grasshoppers during the heat of the daypart play. Part practicality. Roasted grasshoppers, seasoned with salt or herbs, were considered a protein-rich food for travelers and shepherds. Not a delicacy, but a snack that belonged to the dust and sun. You and Jesus walk slowly between the rows. The vines rustle gently in the wind. You spot a small lizard darting across the rocks near your foot, and for a moment everything feels alive in a quiet, unseen way beneath, between, and beyond. Jesus reaches a twisted vine at the edge of the field. It's wild, untamed, climbing across the stones. Its leaves are smaller, its clusters sparse. He crouches beside it, resting a hand on the dry soil. Not every vine is cultivated, he says, but even wild ones can bear fruit. You wonder if he means the vine, or himself, or you. Historians still wonder whether Jesus had first-hand experience with vineyards or simply drew upon their symbolic richness. So many of his parables speak of branches, fruit, pruning, and harvest work. those words born of observation or deeper metaphor. Did he once tend vines with his hands, or only with his thoughts? He pulls gently at a single shoot and points to the tendrils curling around a dry stick. It needs something to lean on, otherwise it wanders. You'll kneel beside him. The soil here is warm, crumbly, the scent of earth rising around you. Jesus digs a small furrow with his fingers and tucks the shoot into it. Just a little guidance, he murmurs. It will find its way. You glance down the rows of many vines, each one quietly working toward fruit you cannot yet see. They wait, green and hidden, while the sun burns and the stones heat. It reminds you of something he said once, maybe a week ago, maybe longer. Patience isn't stillness. It's motion you can't yet measure. You didn't understand then. Now, kneeling beside this wild vine, the words feel like water settling into dry cracks. A gust of wind carries a faint sense, something sweet and dusty. Far off, someone is burning dry leaves. The boy with the grasshopper jar has disappeared, leaving his stick in the dust. Jesus stands. You follow. You reach the end of the vineyard, where the land dips into a shaded hollow. There, among the shadows, stands a small stone preslo, square and timely. The basin is dry, but the grooves and channels are still visible, carved carefully by hands long gone. Jesus runs his fingers along the edge. It's been many harvests since this one was used, he says. You picture the grapes piled high, the sound of feet pressing them down, the juice flowing, staining the stones crimson. A kind of quiet alchemy, slow and sacred. Jesus crouches and scoops a bit of dried dirt from the basin. Dust now, but it remembers sweetness. A whisper of wind stirs the leaves behind you. You sit on the edge of the press, letting the moments settle. A fig falls from a nearby branch and lands in the grass with a soft thud. Jesus doesn't reach for it. He only watches, and after a long pause, says, "Some fruit is meant to feed the earth." The day has slipped into gold. The sun, though still warm, is no longer harsh. Everything feels held by the stones, the vines, the wind, the silence. And you wonder, how many things grow in secret? How many promises ripen without being seen? You close your eyes. You breathe in the scent of sun on grape leaves, the ghost of wine in stone, the hum of something not quite spoken. And beside you, Jesus says nothing, but the silence speaks. The vineyard slips behind you as you and Jesus walk further into the hills, the land growing quieter with every step. The dirt path narrows between low stone walls, their tops cushioned with moss and tiny flowers poking through cracks. Ahead the Judean hills rise gently, not dramatic, but certain layer upon layer of warm stone and waving grass, their silence deeper than sound. You follow without speaking, the rhythm of your feet in tune with his. The light has changed again, softer, almost amber. Bees murmur near thistles. A dove flutters from a tree branch, and somewhere in the distance, a shepherd whistles a slow tune. Jesus stops at a terraced field, its dry furrows cut in neat, hopeful rows across the slope. No one is working here today, but the earth is freshly turned, its scent rich and loamy. Small wooden markers line the rows, maybe olives, maybe barley, maybe something rarer. He crouches and lifts a pinch of dirt, rubbing it between his fingers. Good soil, he says, almost to himself. Mainstream historical fact: farming in the Judean hills depended on terraces, stone-walled platforms built into slopes to hold both soil and water. Farmers used simple tools, wooden plows, mattocks, their own calloused hands. Crops were rotated carefully, barley first, then wheat, then legumes to nourish the ground again. Jesus walks the edge of a furrow and stops at a small cloth bundle set beneath a fig tree. Someone has left it behind. Maybe a laborer went home for the day. He doesn't touch it, only glances at it, and then looks out across the field. You stand beside him and feel the stillness of a place waiting for growth. A quirky cultural detail in these hills. Some farmers tied bells to their goats, not just for locating them, but to scare away birds from freshly sown seed. Others sang while scattering grain, believing the rhythm of voice and motion helped sow more evenly and, maybe, in some hidden way, bless the ground. Jesus picks up a stone, smooth and rounded from weather. He tosses it once in his palm, then sets it aside gently. "You can't plant where the stones rule," he says. You nod, remembering the parable he once told: seeds on rocky ground, scorched before they could root. But this soil looks good, deep, ready. He steps into the field and walks slowly down one of the furrows. His feet leave clear prints. You watch him pause now and then to press his toe against a clump, to bend and break a twig, to simply stand and listen. Not everything sprouts at the same time, he murmurs. Historians still wonder whether Jesus ever worked the land himself. Some say his hands were calloused only from wood and nails. Others argue that in a village like Nazareth, every hand helped when needed. Maybe he planted, maybe he watched. Either way, the language of earth lives in his words. He turns toward you and smiles. Want to plant something? You glance around, there's no seed bag, no basket, but still, you kneel. You gather a handful of loose soil, feel the weight of it, the coolness against your palm. You draw your finger through the dirt, make a shallow line, then gently cover it back. Nothing is planted, not really, but it feels real. Jesus crouches beside you, mirroring your gesture, both of you simply pressing earth for the sake of it. It's enough. Sometimes the act is the seed. You stand together and brush the dust from your robes. The wind sighs through the field. The fig tree rustles behind you. Down the hill, you see movementa, figure climbing slowly, basket balanced on their back. As they near, you recognize a woman from the village, cheeks pink from sun and wind. Evening, Jesus, she calls. He greets her with a nod. Bringing figs. She laughs. Bringing everything. Figs, greens, a goat, too stubborn to walk. She lifts the lid of the basket and shows the small goat curled inside, munching on leaves. Jesus smiles. A wise one. Or lazy. She grins and continues past. You and Jesus watch her descend into the next valley, her laughter trailing like birdsong. The sky is deepening. Shadows grow longer. You reach the top of another terrace and pause. The land before you is scattered with old trees, gnarled and wise-looking, each bent in a different way. Among them, a small stone shrine sits, just a circle of piled rock with dried flowers and a clay lamp inside. Someone built it here. Someone comes back often. Jesus doesn't speak. He only walks to it and kneels. He doesn't pray aloud, doesn't light the lamp, doesn't disturb anything. He rests a hand on the warm stone and bows his head. You kneel beside him. A silence passes, and then he stands and offers you his hand. Together, you turn and begin to walk back through the terraces, your feet brushing old stalks and seeds left behind. The field feels different now, not just a place, but a promise. The sky has turned to dusky rose. Birds fly low. A few lights blink in the distance windows. Lanterns, home. The fields are behind you, but their quiet remains. And ahead, somewhere down the winding path, bread waits. The wind follows you down from the terraces, brushing your cheeks with the scent of earth and crushed herbs. Evening settles across the Judean hills, like a soft shawl gold draining into dusk, the shadows now cool and lengthening. Jesus walks a pace ahead, his robe catching the breeze, his silhouette calm against the deepening sky. You pass another grove, this one planted with young saplings, olive, fig, and something else, maybe pomegranate. Their trunks are thin, their leaves bright. A small fence of woven reed protects them, each stake topped with a bit of cloth or feather to scare the birds. Jesus slows near one tree and taps the soil gently with his foot. Someone's planting with care, he says. Mainstream historical fact. In ancient Judea, planting was often a family effort done by hand with wooden dibbers or sharpened sticks. Seeds dropped one by one, then covered with the heel. Saplings were wrapped in cloth or straw to protect them during the first year. Every tree was precious. An olive tree might take 15 years to yield oil. Jesus crouches and presses his palm to the earth. This one will outlive us both, he says quietly. You nod. It's strange to think of trees lasting longer than people, but then again, it's always been that way. You imagine a child walking here years from now, resting in the shade of this very sapling, never knowing who planted it. A quirky cultural detail. In some Galilean villages, children were each given a tree at birth planted by a parent or midwife in the family plot. The tree became part of their story. At weddings, a branch might be cut and placed in the home. If a tree died young, it was said to be a warning. Tend your soul like your roots. Jesus continues on, and you follow through a rocky bend in the path. Stones crunch beneath your feet. The last sliver of sun slides behind the distant ridge. Then, a clearing, a field of tilled earth, half shadowed by a ridge, stretches ahead. It's quiet but not empty. You see someone there, silhouetted in twilight, bent low with a broad, sweeping motion. The man doesn't look up. With every step, his hand dips into the sack at his waist, casting seed in wide arcs. Even from a distance, you can feel the rhythm of its step. Dip, scatter, step, again. Jesus stands beside you, still. He doesn't choose the ground, he says. He casts, and lets the earth decide. Historians still wonder about the parables. Were they crafted purely to teach, or did they arise from sights like this? Some argue that Jesus' stories were structured with careful intent. Others suggest they grew out of life sown, like seed, without pretense or plan, simply trusting the listener's soil. You and Jesus stand in silence as the sower moves. The man's tunic flutters in the wind, his movements lit by a last streak of light. He's sowing blind. You whisper, "All sowing is." Jesus replies. A breeze stirs the air between you. Then Jesus moves again, walking along the field's edge, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something beneath the soil. You step lightly beside him, careful not to crush any new shoots. You reach a mound of stones at the far end, stacked neatly beside a low wall. A clay jar sits atop them, a little cracked, with a sprig of mint inside. Someone has left it as an offering or reminder. Jesus lifts it, inhales the scent, and sets it back. It's good to mark the places where hope was planted. He murmurs. You remember a line from a woman in the village? Weeds grow loud, good things grow quiet. Here, that feels true. The stars begin to pierce the sky, one by one. First the bright ones, then the pale shimmer behind. You look up and feel very small, land very safe. Jesus turns toward home, and you follow, your footsteps lighter now. A lantern flickers ahead someone's window, and behind you, the field lies in silence, waiting. The path toward the village winds gently downhill now, bordered by brush and thickets of hardy wildflowers still open to the last of the light. Jesus walks with unhurried steps, his hands clasped behind his back, gaze flicking across the fields and fences, as if each one holds a memory. You feel the rhythm of the land itself slowing, matching the breath of the hour. The first lamp flickers to life in a nearby window, casting a golden square onto the dusty wall beside it. From within, you hear a low voice, maybe prayer, maybe song too soft to make out, but rich with warmth. Jesus pauses. That voice reminds me of a man I knew when I was small, he says. He had a limp from a fall in the quarry, but he sang like the angels. Mainstream historical fact. Quarries near towns like Nazareth provided the limestone used for homes and courtyards. Men and boys alike worked with chisels and wooden sleds, hauling stone by hand. Accidents were common, and injuries permanent. Those who couldn't lift often taught the next generation to carve. He glanced at Jesus' face. In the low light, his features look almost etched, tender lines, soft net edges. Did he teach you? You asked. He nods slowly. Not just about stone. As you pass under a low fig branch, the scent of its fruit rises with the cooling air, sweet and earthy. A few goats lie curled in the hollow beneath, their bells quiet. The world is settling in, one breath at a time. A quirky cultural detail. In Galilee, evening was often the time for quiet stories shared around the family fire, parables passed from grandparents to children, not as lessons, but as luck. One common tale was of a fig tree that bore fruit in winter and never spoke a word about how. Jesus leads you through a narrow gate beside a crumbling wall where rosemary grows thick and unruly. A cat slinks past, tail high, vanishing into the shadows. Somewhere ahead, a door creaks on its hinges. The street here is quieter, set slightly apart from the bustle. The stones underfoot are uneven, worn smooth by bare soles and rain. You step with care, your shoulders brushing the cool plaster of the houses. He stops before a small home with a flat roof and clay gutter, the doorway hung with a woven red curtain. From inside, soft light flickers and a scent drifts out: lentils, garlic, and something bright like lemon balm. An old friend, Jesus says, lifting the curtain gently. He doesn't knock. Inside, a woman turns from the hearth, surprised, then smiling. Her hair is silver at the edges, her hands dusted with flour. She presses a kiss to Jesus' cheek and gestures you both in. The room is low-ceilinged and warm. Clay lamps glow along the walls. A low table holds cups, a dish of olives, and a simple stew steaming gently. A basket of flatbread is covered by a cloth. You sit, and the woman pours water into a cup for each of you. She speaks of her son away in Sepphoris, working as a potter's apprentice. She worries, but her voice carries pride. Jesus listens with both hands around his cup, nodding. She asks no questions about where he's been or why he came tonight. She simply breaks the bread and hands it to you both. Historians still wonder how Jesus was received in his own village during his quieter years. Some believe he was loved as a kind son and helpful neighbor. Others argue he remained watchful, already apart in some way. But here, tonight, he's just a guest welcomed home. You dip your bread in the stew-rich with lentils, tangy with lemon and herbs. The warmth fills your chest, grounding and gentle. You look up and catch Jesus' eye. He smiles slightly and tears his bread in half. Outside, the wind has settled. The fig tree rustles once, then goes still. In this room, everything is simple. Food, flame, and company. No one preaches. No one performs. The world feels like it's finally remembered how to be still. You lean back on the mat, hands resting on your knees, listening to the soft crackle of oil in the lamp and the steady breath of a home at peace. Jesus thanks the woman quietly and helps her clear the bowls. She waves him off, but he insists, rinsing the cups with care at the basin near the door. When you step outside again, the stars are bright overhead, clustered like seeds scattered across the heavens. The woman presses a bundle into your hand's bread wrapped in cloth, still warm. She doesn't say goodbye. She just nods, her eyes soft in the lamplight. Jesus tucks the bundle beneath his arm, and the two of you begin to walk once more. No road, no sign, just the slow rhythm of your steps beneath the stars, and the bread between you, still carrying the warmth of someone's hearth. You follow Jesus through the starlit quiet, the village slowly dimming behind you. Lanterns flicker out one by one, and the hush of the night settles in like a blanket. The scent of warm earth, dry straw, and faint smoke lingers in the air. A dog barks once, far off, then nothing. The path now is one of memory worn into the dust, not by direction, but repetition. Jesus walks it without pause, as if every step knows the one before it. You wrap your cloak tighter, not against the cold, but in reverence for the stillness. Eventually, you'd come to a small rise overlooking a cluster of olive trees. The moon casts silver light through their branches, and the leaves whisper softly. Jesus kneels and sets down the cloth-wrapped bread beside him, then settles into the dust without a word. You sit too. For a while, you say nothing. You simply breathe together, two figures beneath the open sky. A bat flits overhead. A breeze stirs the tips of the grasses. Time slows again. Mainstream historical fact. Night in Galilee often meant returning to shared rooftops or open courtyards, where families lay on mats and watched the stars. These spaces doubled as sleeping quarters and gathering places, shaded by day and open by night. Many stories, decisions, and dreams unfolded under the canopy of sky. Jesus lies back now, arms folded behind his head, and looks up at the stars. I used to count them, he murmurs. I never got past 100 before falling asleep. You smile. Did you start over each time? He nods. Every night. A quirky cultural detail. In Galilean folklore, the stars were called the eyes of heaven, believed to open more fully when prayers were whispered with clean hands and a quiet heart. Children were taught that when you saw a star flicker, it meant someone had just been kind to a stranger. Jesus points to a bright cluster near the horizon. That one, he says. That was always my favorite. It looks like a fig leaf to me. You study it. It does. A little. The shape is soft, curled at the edges, cradling dark space. Then he sits up again and unwraps the bundle of bread. It's still warm, though the edges have begun to firm. He breaks it gently and offers half to you. For the journey, he says, even though neither of you seems to be going anywhere. The bread is rich with rosemary and oil, soft inside. You eat slowly, letting the taste open on your tongue. Jesus chews in silence, then says, sometimes this is enough. Not a feast, not a miracle, just warm bread and stars. You nod. The quiet agrees with him. Historians still wonder about these long, unrecorded nights in Jesus' life. Did he wander often? Did he sleep under trees, or on rooftops with cousins and neighbors? Did these silent hours give rise to the parables he'd later share, or were they simply the spaces in which he learned to listen? You don't know, but you do know this. Tonight feels whole. After the bread is gone, Jesus brushes crumbs from his lap and rises. He walks a few steps forward and then crouches beside the base of a tree. Do you follow? There, tangled among roots and shadow, is a nest fallen but mostly intact. Inside, tiny feathers, abandoned or never filled. It's hard to say. He lifts it gently and turns it in his hands. Imagine, he says softly, how long this took to weave. The nest is stitched from straw and grass and thin strips of bark. It's sturdy, yet delicate, like something built on hope alone. He places it gently in the crook of a branch, where it might be safe again. You think of all the unseen efforts, the unnoticed care, the hands that worked quietly in the background of each day. You think of your own life, your own waiting. You ever get tired of planting what might not grow? You ask. Jesus looks at you for a long moment. Now he says, because sometimes you plant and someone else will harvest, and sometimes it's not about the growing, it's about being faithful in the planting. You hold that thought gently, like the nest, afraid it might fall apart if you squeeze it too hard. The moon shifts overhead. Somewhere, a nightbird calls, low and brief. You stay there together a while longer, your shoulders just barely touching, the quiet thick with something sacred. Then Jesus speaks again, just a whisper. There's peace in not knowing, and somehow there is. The night deepens as you and Jesus make your way slowly down the slope from the olive trees. The path is gentler now, flanked by dry grasses that sway softly in the breeze. The moonlight casts your shadows ahead of you, long and flickering on the uneven ground. You walk without hurry, your sandals brushing the earth with the rhythm of someone who is nowhere urgent to be. Jesus seems content to move at this pace, his cloak fluttering just slightly as he walks, his eyes half lowered, as though still lingering in the quiet of the fig tree and nest. At the edge of the field, you'd come upon a stone wall low enough to sit on. Jesus stops and perches on it, gesturing for you to join him. From here, the valley opens wide beneath the night sky, stretching toward the hills of Judea in the far distance. The silence isn't empty, it's full of hush and breath and unseen life. Mainstream historical fact. Judean hills and valleys were dotted with small farming plots, olive terraces, and grazing lands. These lands were worked with hand tools, hoes, pruning knives, and wooden plows pulled by oxen. Much of the planting and tending was done on foot, close to the earth, shaped by patience and a deep knowledge of seasons. Jesus leans forward, picks up a small clod of dirt, and crumbles it slowly between his fingers. This soil, he says, has been waiting. For what? You ask. For someone to trust it again. You watch as the dust sifts through his hand, falling silently back to the ground. A quirky cultural detail. In some Galilean villages, it was common to bless a field before planting by walking its borders, while singing softly, often a psalm or a lullaby. It wasn't a loud or ritualistic act, but a way to remind both soil and soul of their connection. Some believed the land grew better when it was sung too. Jesus hums quietly now, not a tune you recognize, but something soft and old. It carries in the night air like smoke. You find a stick and begin to trace simple lines in the dust at your feet. The marks don't mean anything, but the act of drawing settles your mind. Jesus watches for a moment, then draws a spiral next to yours, his fingertip catching the moonlight as it moves. Do you think everything planted grows? You ask. Jesus doesn't answer at first. He just keeps drawing in the dust, spirals becoming circles, circles becoming waves. Then he says, no. But everything that's planted changes the soil. The wind stirs again. You both sit quietly with that truth. Historians still wonder how deeply Jesus' teachings on sowing and harvest reflected his own early work in the hills. Did he plant? Did he tend vines? Was the parable of the sower born from experience or observation? Some scholars suggest that Jesus, as a tekton, might have worked not only in wood or stone, but also in land, repairing terraces, building olive presses, digging irrigation channels. You imagine it, Jesus as a teenager, sleeves rolled, fingers calloused, wiping sweat with the hem of his tunic, not preaching, not healing, just working, just listening, just learning the slow language of the earth. A donkey brays faintly in the distance. Jesus stands again, brushing his hands clean. Come, he says, there's something I want to show you. You follow him off the path, through a narrow cleft in the stone wall. On the other side, tucked into the earth, is a half-ruined pressan, old olive press carved into limestone, its basin cracked, its weight stone leaning against a fig trunk. This was my uncle's, Jesus says, or maybe his father's. It's been empty for years. You step closer. The shape is still clear, the channel where oil once ran, the slab where olives were crushed, the well-worn groove where feet once circled again and again, pressing fruit into sustenance. Jesus kneels beside the channel and touches the stone. Sometimes I think this place remembers more than we do. You kneel beside him, pressing your own hand to the cold surface. He looks up at you. What do you think it takes to wait like this? You think for a moment, trust, maybe, or hope. Jesus nods, and both require time. A shooting star streaks silently across the sky. You don't say anything. You just watch it disappear, leaving no trace but wonder. Jesus leans back against the fig tree growing from the edge of the press. Even broken things can grow, he says, especially if they're rooted deep enough. You think of all the cracked things in your life, the parts that feel unfruitful or unfinished, and somehow, under this moon, beside this press, they don't seem hopeless anymore. You sit in that thought, letting it settle, and then Jesus speaks one more time before the silence returns. Plant anyway. The quiet lingers long after Jesus speaks. Plant anyway. The words nestle into your thoughts, like seeds themselves, unobtrusive, small, but full of potential. You tuck them away in your heart as you rise again, following him back toward the path. The press fades behind you, swallowed by the olive trees and dusk. The air cools further as night presses in fully, the sky overhead soft with stars. Jesus doesn't speak, and neither do you. You simply walk side by side, the way two people do when conversation isn't needed, when presence is enough. You'll pass a stone cistern now, wide and round like a bowl pressed into the land. It catches the moonlight, its surface still. Jesus pauses beside it, glancing in. You look toward for a moment. Your own reflection stares back, soft and distorted, framed by starlight. Mainstream historical fact. Cisterns like this were vital in hilly regions of Judea. Rain was rare, and every drop had to be saved. People carved deep into rock to catch runoff, sealing the sides with plaster. Some families had small private cisterns, but most relied on shared ones, dug near homes or fields, filled only by seasons of blessing. Jesus dips his fingers lightly in the water and lets the droplets fall again in concentric rings. Even stillness has movement, he says, watching the ripples. You nod, letting the silence return. A quirky cultural detail. Some Judean households placed smooth stones at the bottom of their cisterns, special ones, often passed down through generations. They believed the stones held the memory of water and helped keep the well welcoming to the rain. Children were taught never to remove them. You wonder how many drops those stones beneath your feet have held, how many years of thirst, how many seasons of waiting. Jesus steps away from the cistern and leads you upward again, higher toward a ridge you hadn't noticed before. From the top, the land unfolds beneath you like a patchwork: silver groves, gold fields, flickering lamplight from scattered homes. The world feels vast, but also close, like you could reach down and trace the paths with your finger. He sits, pulling his knees to his chest, cloak gathered around him like a shawl. You settle beside him, and the breeze brushes across your face, carrying a faint hint of lavender and thyme from somewhere unseen. Then Jesus speaks, not to teach, but to share. I used to think the sky was a bowl turned upside down, he says quietly, eyes gazing into the stars, and that the stars were seeds waiting to fall. You smile at the thought. And maybe, he adds, that's not so far from true. Historians still wonder how much early cosmology shaped daily understanding in first-century Judea. People navigated by stars, counted time by moon phases, and marked festivals by the turning of constellations. Some children were taught to whisper greetings to the stars at night, to build familiarity with heaven. You remember hearing that once, a neighbor child murmuring good night to Orion's belt like a friend. Jesus lifts a hand and traces a line from one star to another, not naming them, just following the pattern. Some say faith is just walking without knowing where the path leads. But I think he trails off, letting the pause stretch like a thread. I think it's more like planting without knowing the season. You breathe that in. The earth below is resting. You can feel it like a beast curled beneath a blanket of stars. Heart, slow, warm. You lie back and stare upward. Jesus speaks again, so softly you barely hear it. Even in silence, something listens. He could be talking about the stars, or the wind, or maybe the soil below you. A fox darts across the ridge ahead, its coat a flash of russet and gold before vanishing into shadow. You watch its path, quick and certain, and wonder how many unseen paths run through this land unknown human, known and lost. Jesus watches too, saying nothing. A few minutes pass in shared silence. Then he asks, almost as if the question had been lingering all day, "What are you waiting for?" You don't answer right away. You think of everything you've hoped would grow, the prayers whispered without response, the plans paused, the dreams too delicate to say aloud. And yet, in this moment, none of them feel foolish. They feel planted. You finally reply, "I don't know." Jesus nods like that's the truest answer you could have given. He lies back beside you now, his head resting on one arm. The stars above seem even closer. "You know," he says, after a pause, "the olives that taste sweetest are the ones that grow in hardest soil." You turn that over in your mind. Perhaps bitterness is only the beginning. Perhaps patience is the fruit no one sees growing. The stars above continue their quiet movement, each one planted in its place. And you, beside him, feel like one of them, silent, steady, and shining without need for notice. The wind changes slightly, brushing the hilltop with a gentler touch, as though even the night is listening. You and Jesus remain lying in the grass, letting the quiet settle, letting the slope of the land and the rhythm of breath become your world. Below, the village glows faintly, softened by distance and haze. Smoke curls from a few hearths, and somewhere faint, a lullaby floats on the air. A dog barks once, then falls silent again. The night isn't empty, it's simply calm. Eventually, Jesus sits up and stretches. "Let's walk a little more," he says. You follow him down the far side of the hill, where olive trees thin into open grass. The path curves past a thicket of bushes, and then flattens near a broad stone terrace, old and uneven. A low wall rings the edge, half tumbled, moss between the cracks. Jesus steps over it and walks to the center. "This was once a threshing floor," he says. Mainstream historical fact. Ancient Judean threshing floors were communal spaces, usually circular and leveled stone or packed earth, where grain was separated from chaff. During harvest, oxen would trample stalks underfoot, or people would beat them with flails. The best floors were on high ground where the wind could carry away the chaff. You imagine it now, workers moving rhythmically, golden sheaves bundled nearby, the sound of hooves and laughter, the dry whisper of straw underfoot. Jesus kneels and picks up a handful of dirt. There's no grain here now, just dust and a few dry weeds, but the wind still remembers, he says softly. He blows gently into his palm, sending the dust spinning away in the moonlight. A quirky cultural detail. On some threshing floors, families carved names or symbols into cornerstones for blessing or remembrance. If you search long enough, you might still find a faint sun, a fish, or a flower etched their generations, layering their hopes into stone. You step forward and trace a finger along one stone edge, half expecting to feel a carving. There is one, a faint spiral, worn thin by weather and time. "What does it mean?" you ask. Jesus shrugs. "Maybe a promise, maybe nothing. That's the wonder of old things." He rises again, brushing his hands clean. Then he points to the stars above, where a soft trail of light slices the sky. "Migrating geese," he says. "They follow paths older than memory." You stare upward. You hadn't even noticed them, just a thin V gliding past Orion, silent and sure. Historians still wonder whether Jesus traveled along these migration routes as a child, watching the skies with the same quiet awe. Some suggest his parables drew from every direction above below, with woven together through years of observing the land and listening more than speaking. He looks at you now. "Come," he says. "There's one more place I want to show you." You nod, and the two of you continue along the path, feet brushing against soft weeds. Crickets sing nearby. The occasional flash of fireflies pulses like heartbeat. Soon, you reach a dry riverbed. Smooth stones litter the bottom, pale in the starlight. Trees lean inward from both banks, their leaves whispering overhead. Jesus steps into the dry channel and walks along it, slow and steady. You follow, boots crunching gently on gravel. One stone catches your eye. It's almost heart-shaped, its surface smooth from years of water you can no longer hear. "This used to rush in spring," he says, crouching to pick up a twig. "When the hills were green, it would flood the fields below. And now it waits." The words echo in the stillness. You sit on a large stone, and Jesus sits beside you. For a moment, The only sound is the brush of wind through branches and the occasional flutter of wings from a nearby tree. There's faith in that, too, he adds, to dry up, but stay ready. You think of all the dry places inside yourself, hopes once flowing, now paused. And yet, maybe they aren't gone. Maybe they're waiting. You lean back against the bank wall, head tilted upward. Above, stars shimmer like seeds, not yet planted. The air is cool, but not cold. Jesus picks up a stone and turns it in his hand before placing it back down, exactly where it was. No need to change anything tonight. Sometimes, he says, what we think is finished is just a season. You close your eyes and let the silence hold you. Not every holy thing shines. Some of it waits. Some of it is dust, marked by wind, and some of it walks beside you under the stars. You and Jesus leave the dry riverbed behind, climbing a gentle slope that opens into an orchard nestled between two low ridges. Moonlight spills across the tree's fig almond, and a few young pomegranates, not yet heavy with fruit. The scent in the air is faint but sweet, tinged with sap and the ghost of blossoms. Neither of you speaks for a while. You simply walk side by side, the night quiet as linen folded in a basket. Then Jesus pauses beneath a fig tree and leans his back against the trunk. This one's still young, he says, patting the bark. Won't bear for another season. You reach up and touch one of the large leaves, soft and waxy beneath your fingers. A faint breeze makes them whisper together. Mainstream historical fact. In Judean agriculture, fig trees often took several years to mature before yielding fruit. They were prized not only for their sweetness, but also for their shade and symbolism, peace, prosperity, and the presence of divine blessing. Jesus lowers himself to sit in the grass again. You join him. The man who planted this, he says, left before it ripened. He never got to taste what he planted. You feel a pang in your chest. That's sad. Maybe, Jesus replies. Or maybe he planted knowing someone else would sit here someday. A quirky cultural detail. In some Judean villages, it was tradition to plant a tree at the birth of a child. One for boys, one for girls, for sons, cypress, or cedar for daughters. When those children married, branches from their tree were used to build part of the wedding canopy. You look around now, wondering which tree was planted for whom, and how many lives grew up wrapped in their shade. Jesus closes his eyes again, face turned slightly to the wind. Historians still wonder whether Jesus' parable of the barren fig tree grew from a moment like this, sitting in the grass, thinking of people who sowed and waited, who believed in the fruit they might never taste. It makes you think about patience, not the kind that bites its tongue and taps its foot, but the kind that trusts the earth, even when it looks empty. Jesus opens his eyes. Let's gather some twigs. You'll help him pick up dry branches from the ground, slender almond shoots, crisp fig stems, a piece of wind-fallen pomegranate bark. Together you carry them to a small fire pit left behind by shepherds, ringed with blackened stones. Jesus crouches and arranges the twigs with care. You've done this before, watched a fire take shape from patient fingers and whispered breath, but tonight there's something quieter about it, more reverent. He strikes flint against stone, and after a few tries, a small ember, it glows gently. He blows. The ember becomes flame. The twigs crackle, curling inward with warmth. You sit beside the growing fire, hands open toward it. The night around you deepens, the orchard vanishing into silhouette. Jesus doesn't speak, and neither do you. The fire talks enough. Then, softly, he says, "When I was a child, my father once brought me here." He adds another stick. "I asked him when the trees would bloom again. He said, in their time." He smiles at the memory. "I thought he meant the trees. Now I wonder if he meant me." You stare into the fire, the wood hissing as sap boils out in tiny sparks. It's strange, this feeling, not sorrow, not even peace, something deeper, like your soul has stopped holding its breath. Jesus picks up a long almond branch and places it on the edge of the flames. It smolders slowly, releasing a sweet, earthy scent. He stands and dusts off his robe. "We should go," he says. "The moon is high." You rise with him, firelight flickering across your sandals. As you leave, he scatters a few dry leaves into the pit, a farewell of sorts. The trees hush behind you as you follow the path back toward the village. Ahead, the rooftops rise like shadowed teeth against the sky. Behind, the fire glows low, soon to sleep. You walk without speaking, but you can feel the rhythm again. dust and breath, stone and memory. This path has been walked by many. Now, it's yours too. The village comes into view again, softened by the haze of lamp smoke and moonlight. You and Jesus walk the final stretch in near silence, your sandals brushing loose dust from the beaten path. From somewhere down the hill, a dog barks once, then falls quiet. A soft murmur of laughter drifts from a nearby courtyard. Life has slowed, but it hasn't yet fully As you pass one low house, a clay lamp glows in the doorway. A woman sits beside it, rocking a child wrapped in a faded linen sling. She hums a melody low in her throat, rhythmic, repetitive, almost like a prayer woven through breath. Jesus offers her a nod. She smiles in return, eyes lined with the kind of tiredness that holds love at its core. Mainstream historical fact. In 1st century Judea, many homes were small, single-room dwellings built from stone and plastered mud, often with flat roofs and packed earth floors. Families slept together in shared space, and infants were carried in cloth slings throughout daily tasks. As you pass, you catch a glimpse of the woman dipping her fingers into a clay bowl of water, touching it gently to the child's forehead. A gesture, perhaps a blessing, or simply a cooling touch. Either way, it stays with you. You follow Jesus around the next bend, where the houses grow tighter, packed close around a small open square. In the center stands a cracked stone bench and a few scattered baskets, empty now, but holding traces of the dull leaves. A bit of thread, a broken fig. Jesus pauses and sits. You join him. The air here feels still, but not empty, as if the stone beneath you remembers every voice that's ever sat here, every prayer spoken without words. A quirky cultural detail. In some Judean villages, elders believed that stones could carry memory. It was common to leave token pebbles, carved symbols, or scraps of thread at favorite resting places, marking both presence and prayer. Jesus picks up a small pebble and turns it between his fingers. You ask, "Do you think places remember us?" He smiles softly. "Only if we leave something worth remembering." He sets the pebble down. Historians still wonder whether Jesus' relationship with these common places, the squares, benches, village walls shaped how he later spoke of the kingdom of heaven, not as palaces or empires, but as yeast in dough, a net cast into the sea, a seed in good soil. The sacred is something hidden in the ordinary. You close your eyes for a moment, letting your back rest against the wall behind the bench. Its surface is cool from shadow. A breeze stirs faintly through the square, carrying the scent of distant fig smoke and worn linen and earth that has been walked on for generations. Jesus is quiet beside you, one hand resting palm up on his knee, the other lightly brushing the dust from his robe. You ask him something you've been wondering all day. Do you miss it? Being a child. He takes a moment before answering. "I think I remember it more than I miss it," he says. "The way bread tasted after fasting, my mother's singing, the sound of water at the well." He turns his face toward the stars. But everything has its season. You both look up now. The sky above Nazareth is clear, pierced by more stars than you've ever counted. No clouds, no lantern glow, just the wide canopy of the heavens, quiet and steady. Jesus points to a familiar constellation, 3 stars in a crooked row. "Farmers call that one the plough," he says. "They say when it tilts westward, the rains are near." You look again, seeing it now the shape of the blade. Mainstream historical fact. Rural communities in Galilee often read the stars to mark agricultural seasons. Certain constellations signaled times for sowing, harvesting, or sheltering animals from changing weather. These were oral calendars, passed from generation to generation. You lean back and whisper, "Will it rain soon?" "Maybe," he says. "Maybe not. But the fields will wait. They always do." A gentle quiet settles again. From somewhere behind a rooftop wall, a goat shifts in sleep. You hear a baby's muffled cry, then silence. It's the kind of night that lingers in your bones long after it passes. Jesus rises, brushing the dust from his hands. You follow him through one last lane. The home's growing darker now, lamps extinguished, voices hushed. He stops outside a low doorway, your doorway. Beside it sits a clear-upped bundle. You lift the cloth. Inside, a round flatbread, folded with soft herbs and sprinkled with a few pinches of salt. A gift, warm, still, fragrant, left without name. Jesus gestures for you to break it. You tear it carefully in two, offering him half. He takes it, bows his head, then lifts the bread to his lips. You do the same, and for a moment, nothing else exists. Only the warmth in your hands, the taste of salt and green herbs, the steady breath of night, and the company of one who walks beside you not as teacher or legend, but as friend. You step inside your home, the quiet following like a soft cloak. Behind you, Jesus lingers for a moment on the threshold, eyes gentle. You don't say anything. You don't need to. He offers a small nod, a kind that carries more than words, turns back into the night. You watch him go, his silhouette folding into shadow and lamplight, until he disappears around the curve of the lane. Inside, the room is dim, lit only by the orange flicker of a clay lamp in the corner. The air smells of dust, herbs, and the last whisper of warm bread. You settle down near the hearth, letting your fingers rest against the cool stone floor. Outside, the crickets begin again, singing in soft, overlapping waves. Somewhere nearby, a jug tips with a hollow clink. Farther still, a door creaks and shuts with care. You press your back against the wall and let your head rest. From here, the whole day plays out again, not in flashes, but in slow moments. The hand on your shoulder by the olive tree, the figs split open in the sun, the quiet of the bench in the square, the way Jesus chewed each bite of bread as if tasting memory. You close your eyes. Mainstream historical fact. In 1st century Judea, the rhythm of village life often followed the light rising with the dawn, sleeping soon after dark. Homes rarely had more than 1 or 2 oil lamps. Nights were slow, lit by breath and voice and fire. A breath of wind stirs the linen drape at the window. For a second, you imagine you hear footsteps against sandals brushing packed earth, a familiar rhythm heading home. Maybe you do. A quirky cultural detail. Some Galilean families believed the blessings traveled like footsteps. Each visit to a home left traces of peace, small invisible threads that lingered. It was common to sprinkle a little water or oil near the doorway after a guest departed, a sign of gratitude and continued welcome. You rise. Near your door, a small clay bowl holds a spoonful of olive oil and a sprig of dried thyme. You take a pinch between your fingers and scatter it gently onto the threshold. For gratitude, for memory, for presence. Historians still wonder whether these small rituals, unrecorded in scrolls but handed down across firelight and quiet evenings, were the true heart of spiritual life. Did Jesus learn reverence not in the synagogues alone, but in gestures like these? Water offered at the well, flour shared for baking, laughter between friends. Maybe sacredness was always here. You settle back into your blanket and draw it around your shoulders. The lamp burns lower now, throwing long shadows across the walls. The heat of the day has faded, replaced by a coolness that hums gently through the air. Somewhere not far away, someone is humming, not loud, just enough for you to hear. And the story doesn't end here. It stretches into tomorrow, and the day after that, into every slow walk beneath olive branches, every sip of water drawn with care, every fig tasted before it ripens fully. You'll wake again with the sun. Maybe earlier, you'll step barefoot onto cool earth, feel the world waking with you. Maybe Jesus will be waiting down the lane, or maybe you'll carry him with you in your hands, your breath, your memory. Because once you've walked beside someone like that, someone who listens to seeds and stirs dough with reverence, someone who speaks more with presence than with sermons, something changes. You start to see the sacred everywhere, in a loaf, in a step, in the silence between 2 words. You close your eyes. The world outside is dimming into deep indigo. Fig smoke drifts in threads through the rooftops. The village has gone quiet, but it hasn't gone empty. It breathes with you, softly, slowly, like bread rising. And now, the day draws to a close. The footsteps fade, the lamps grow faint, and even the stars begin to still themselves in the sky. Your breath matches the rhythm of the world around you, slow, quiet, rooted. You lie there, wrapped in warmth and silence, letting the softness of the night carry you. Let your thoughts drift gently, now over fig leaves rustling in the wind, the sound of grinding stone and kneading hands, the taste of bread still warm from the oven. Feel the gentle press of memory, not sharp or urgent, but smooth and worn, like the edge of a clay bowl passed hand to hand. You are safe here. You are known here. The world may be full of noise and questions, but here beneath the fig tree, beside the bread oven, walking step by step through olive groves, there is no rush, only this breath, only this peace. Rest now in the sacred quiet. Let your spirit nestle into the folds of night, like seeds in soft soil, like a story still unfolding. Jesus once said that the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, small, quiet, unnoticed, but within it grows something vast, something sheltering. So let this quiet be your shelter. Let this breath be your prayer. And let this night carry you gently into sleep, like the hush of dawn, like a lullaby hummed over firelight. Good night.